Hello and good morning. I'm Natalie, and today we are going to be doing a bit of a scrapbooking. So I thought we'd have a little bit of fun today. It's been a little bit of a stressful week, or a very busy week at least. So I thought I would take a little bit of time and just do a little bit of playtime. So I hope you can join me. So what we need for today, you're going to need some watercolour inks or acrylic ink at a push. You could be using fountain pen ink or you could use watercolour tubes. So basically we're going for something that is vivid but translucent. So I'm using the Daler-Rowney Aquafine watercolour inks. I just bring that up there so you can see it. Come on, focus camera. There we go. So I've let these kind of sit on my desk for a few days. So you'll see that the red is still pretty much mixed, but the blue you're going to see actually settles. So it's good to kind of sit them on your desk so that you can see how they're going to behave when we're working with them, so that pigment is going to settle. Just something to bear in mind when we're working with the glass pen in a bit. So I'm just going to give that a little shake. And to the side of me, I do have alcohol hand gel and bamboo cloth, just in case we get messy. Chances are we'll get messy. So don't be afraid to say hi and let me know that you're watching. Chat should come up down the bottom. And I should also be able to see you on my little display. So we can see that the blue is going to be a nice vivid blue. And our yellow, again, hasn't settled too much, but I will still give it a little bit of a shake just in case. So I'm going to be working on some 12 by 12 card, which is 350 GSM. And if you have some stamps and things, you can bring those in later on. But for this first part, I just want to focus on getting kind of a background in, and then we can work on building that up at another point. So next, what you're going to need is a palette. So I've gone for a nice sturdy palette. And you want something that has quite deep wells, so these little ones around the outside, so that we've got a puddle of ink that we can actually dip our pens and our brushes into. So just do let me know that you're watching, just because I think it might be playing up. With the live chat. Don't have a way of checking at the moment either, which is a little bit annoying. So let's start with the yellow actually. Each of these bottles has a little dropper. So we're going to pull up some ink, tap off the end, and then we're going to put some into the first well. And a little bit into the second. So I want about half that amount again. So just kind of put a bit more in there. Okay. So do let me know that you're watching. I was a little bit late putting up the event as well. So next we're going to use some of the red. I'm going to do the same again. A little bit in there. A little bit more in there. Now when you're using something like this where you've got eyedroppers, just be careful that as you get to the end of the ink in your eyedropper, it can kind of start to bubble and spatter. in there, and more in there. So now I'm going to work back through and put a little drop in there. Now the blue is going to be quite overpowering, so I'm not going to put too much in. I'm going to go back to my yellow. So we know we've already got purple mix to go. So let's take some of that yellow and drop that in there. Now, as I said, the blue is going to be quite strong, so you're going to need quite a bit of yellow to balance that out. And finally, we just need a little drop of red in the yellow section. And that should give us all of our colours that we need. We can always mix some more if need be. So I have a spray bottle of water. I also have a wide flat container of water as well, so that we can kind of do some different effects. Now if you have salt or bleach, you can also use those too. And I'm going to start off by just adding some larger areas of colour. So I'm going to grab a bigger brush for this one. So I'm going to wet my brush first, because otherwise if we put a dry brush into our ink, what it's going to do is just go which we don't necessarily want to do. Okay, so I'm going to start off with a little bit of this red. Now this isn't watercolour paper, so that's just something to bear in mind. The way that you do this is going to kind of affect how it's going to bleed through. So I'm going to mix up that orange a little bit, and let's go and put some of that in there. So what we're aiming for is we're going to do a rainbow across. Okay, I'm going to dip into that yellow and bring a bit of that yellow in. Still quite orangey, so let's just rinse that out a little bit. So remember how I said I got my bamboo on standby? This is one of those times when we need it. So just blot your brush off. Try and get as much of that ink out as possible. Okay, and back into the yellow, and let's pull that yellow through there. So I'm not following any particular kind of outline at this stage. We just want to have the colours kind of seeping into one another. So let's do a bit of a mix now for our green. Might need a little bit more yellow in that, but we'll see how it goes. So depending on the shades that you are using for your red, blue and yellow, you're going to get some different colours to me. So next we're going to go for our green. Just going to again just clean that out so that when we go into our blue we get a proper blue. Your primaries tend to be the colours that you need to have your clean brush for. So your secondaries you can kind of get away with not cleaning, but we want to make sure that we get a nice bit of blue. If you're finding it starting to bring that green in again, just clean your brush. Blot it off. Dampen the brush again. If you have space on your desk, have 2 pots of water and you'll be having a much easier time of it. But yeah, stop for a little bit of space, and we're nearly running out of room now. So let's quickly mix my purple. Might just need a little bit more blue, but we'll see how we go. A little bit more. So you're going to notice that instead of dipping into my blue to mix that, I'm just going to add a bit more from my bottle so I can keep my blue nice and clean. Chat really isn't working today, is it? that another little mix. Okay. Could add a bit more blue in there, but I don't want to let it dry too much. Okay, so I'm going to clean that off, and just because we want that blue to be a bit more dominant, let's get a bit more blue on that. There we go. Just try and get that red out. Okay, so once you've got something that looks like that, and we kind of got it starting to blend through, you're going to want to go just back to that beginning section. I'm going to go back into the red first, just so we can re-wet this end here, like so. And we can blend that out with water in a minute. Then we're going to go into our purple, or our purpley red in this case, and just deepen that down. Clean out your brush. So your water is going to get very mucky using these, so that's just something to bear in mind. That typically what I would do in this case is just keep using the shallow dish, but just keep replacing it and cleaning it. Okay, so you should have something that looks like this. I'm just going to clean that brush out really, really well, so make use of that bamboo cloth. So mine is looking awfully pretty. Okay. So now that our water is that dirty, I'm just going to set that to one side, and let's bring in a bit of a spray bottle. So let's just turn it on, always helps. And I'm just going to spray it into a well, just so I've got somewhere to dip. Okay, now we can start to just pull that colour through so that we kind of smudge those edges. And you're going to see as we do that, the ink that's already on our page is going to reactivate, so it starts to blend a bit better. Now, watercolour paper is going to kind of really help you do this a lot easier. Now, as we got to that green, just need to clean my brush a little bit. Just going to rotate that as well, just so. There we go. Bit more water. There we go. You want to kind of make sure that you're not getting like a secondary line in there. And just blend any bits that you just think it just needs a little bit more help. Okay, a bit more water. And there we go. So just because that green's running just a little bit down here, I'm just going to try and soak that up. So you just want to dry your brush out. Then we're just going to run a dry brush along, and you're going to see that sort of hoover effect in action. Okay. So we can do the same down the other edge too. But now that we've done that, let's start to work into it a bit more. So set your big brush to one side, and we can start to work with either a glass pen or a lip brush, and I'm going to show you both so that you can see how they both react a little bit differently. So let's wet my brush. Somebody didn't clean a brush when you put it away. That's okay. So I'm going to go into this green, and let's just do Now, the longer you wait for this to dry before you do this, the sharper your lines are going to be. I'm just going to trace that around the edges. And if you have like a particular design in mind, it might influence which option you go for. So I'm going to go into the orange. I wonder if you can guess what I'm going to be putting on my lip panel here. So let's go into our already purple. Let's pull this out here. So you can see where it hits that wet, it's going to blur. And when it's dry, you're going to keep your edges nice and sharp. Let's give this. Now we know that our blue settles from our time leaving it on our desk. So we know that as we're working with it, we kind of need to make sure that we're stirring. And that's something that you're going to have to bear in mind if you're going to be using a glass pen. So you want to be kind of refreshing that ink before you dip your pen in. Okay. Let's clean that out. Okay, I'm going to go into the blue now. And let's try and bring this blue in here. So just give it another stir. Just needs a little bit more. It's a bit of a weird one, this one. So let's try that again. Not really getting a lot of that blue. Might top that up with some tube watercolour at some point, I think, just to make it a bit more strong when you compare it to the other hues. Okay, and we can do that there. So even if you're thinking at the moment, I really don't like where this is going, don't panic, just stay with it. Because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting our stamped images over the top. So you're not going to see it in quite the same way. So we could go for either some larger images or some smaller ones. The choice is yours. Whether you want to kind of have something that you have a mass of, or if you want to go for something a bit bolder. Okay, so let's break out our little pen. So those of you that have never used a glass pen before, don't be frightened of them. They're actually quite fun to play with. So, just going to clean that brush out for a second. So, glass pens, what are they like? Here we go. This one is mine. And you'll find that you can get different bodies, so they're not all this really delicate. So some are much bolder in terms of their top section. And then we have the nib section, which is like twisted glass, or it will have a vein going down it. Then you have this little ball section here. Now the idea is that you dip your pen up to the ball, and then you've got like your maximum amount of ink that you can go for. Now if you're writing, that is perfect how you should do it. But if you're drawing and you know that you only want to use little bits of colour, don't think you have to dip all the way up here, because for starters you'll be wasting a lot of ink. you want to keep it down to this bottom section here. Okay, so I'm just going to dip and roll, and because we're working with a shallower section of ink, that rolling action is going to enable us to get that ink all the way around. So then when we draw, it's going to have that ink being kind of reapplied all the way around. So let's start to work back into this section here, and we can go and do some little smaller squiggles. Now bear in mind that this is still quite wet, so ideally what you would be doing is drying between this and the previous section. I don't want to deafen you all. Okay, I'm just going to take that red and just do a little bit down the bottom here, so you can see that eventually you're going to have to top back up. So let's just get a little bit more on that. There we go. Just take your time. If you want it to be like really soft, smooth curves, if you go a little bit quicker, but just when you're practicing, just kind of go slower and get used to how it feels on the paper, because that in itself is a bit of an unusual one, because you expect it to feel kind of scratchy and it doesn't. Okay, then when you've got kind of as much of that colour as what you want, then you can clean out. So I'm going to put it into my water. Now bear in mind this is a glass jar that you're putting your pen into, so you don't want to really stab it in there, you just want to be gentle. And then I'm going to use my bamboo wipe, like so, and I'm just going to drag that down the pen, and that's going to clear out all those little valleys in our nib. Okay, then we can go into the next colour. So I'm going to go into this yellow here, a little bit of a stir, very gently, and let's go into the yellow. So I'm going to do some marks here, and this time instead of swirling, I'm going to just do some little hatching. Now these are going to be quite subtle. Okay, and let's get a bit more ink on that. Another little roll, and I'm going to do the same but over on this side. And I'm doing little double lines on this just because glass pen nibs are quite fine, and because we want to be able to see what we're doing, just want to be a little bit stronger. See that? And I knew eventually I'd get my hand in it. Okay, so again, I'm gonna wash that out very carefully and blot it on my bamboo. Even though I'm now going to go to green. Okay, so green, let's do some little swooshes. So I'm just going to start at a point and I'm just going to swoosh into the green, like so. So let's see if I can get that even closer for you. There we go. So we swooshed into the green and across here. I'm going to take a bit more of that, and let's try and follow that line but at a slight offset. Okay, now the third one is the trick. So there we go, and we're going to keep repeating that, so we have 5 little swooshes. Now if you start to think that's going a bit too large there, let's go back inside and do one over here. There we go. So if you can feel that your surface is still damp, just be a bit lighter with your pressure, because the ink will still transfer. You don't have to to score it as such. It's a shame I can't see your comments, a bit noisy that I can't. But hey ho. I will come back and check them after the live. Okay. So let's go next into done yellow, done green. Let's bring a bit of that blue in. So we can hear now when we're running that on the bottom that you've got like a powdery residue in the bottom. That isn't the glass that's making that noise. You're all right. Okay, so as we zoomed in, you can see how that ink then goes up the nib. Okay, and let's go for some little curls over here. So let's go out this way. So bits of this is still wet, so I don't mind. That's going to help it blend into the background. Okay, and because we've got this kind of purpley section up here, I'm just going to do a little bit of blue into that too, and we can just do some little curls. Now this is where my hand is going to go a bit wobbly because I'm trying to float above and a bit awkward so that you can see the palette in shot. But as you're working at home, you can put yourself comfy. And a bit more there. I'm just going to do some little ones just here, just to kind of fade out as such. Okay. So that's the start of our background. Now, what I was going to do is actually do the stamping and the colouring all in one go. So let's see how we go. But I'm a bit concerned whether I've actually got viewers or if this is playing up. So it's not really wanting to tell me. And because I have my iPad and phone on Do Not Disturb, I can't even tell if you didn't message me, which is really bad. There we go. So, just going to leave my glass pen to one side and just let that air dry before we put it back in its box, because we don't want it to go mouldy. And let's set our scrapbook page to one side so that can carry on drying. Now, if I put that there, then we can carry on seeing that in shot. And let's go for another piece of scrapbook card. Just going to move my palette safely out of harm's way, just because. And let's grab some stamps. So not what I was really thinking of. Do a bit of tap dancing for a moment. Okay, so I'm just going to grab probably a butterfly would be good if I could find one. But if not, there we go. That's what I need. So, one butterfly. And let's take the opportunity to play with something new. So I'm going to open a VertiFine Claire and I'm going to go for the Time Cone. And I'm going to grab a stamp block just to be able to stamp this nice and easily. So I'm not going to be too fussy about how I'm stamping this in terms of layout, because I'm going to cut these out so that they can go on our other sheet. But what I do want to do is make sure that I get a good impression. Okay. So good pressure all over the stamp. Just try and avoid the edges, particularly where you've got like little bits of detail, because just the pressure you put on the body should be enough. Okay. Nice clear image. Now I'm going to need about 6 or 7 of these. If somebody could let me know if they can see this or not, it would be great. No idea how, because yeah, it's just obviously having a moment. So when we're stamping to scan to cut, we just want to be mindful of keeping a bit of separation between our images, just to make it easier for our machine. One more for measure. Okay. So if we start at the top and work our way down, by the time we get to the bottom, those should be pretty dry. And I'm just going to clean off my stamp with my dampened bamboo, because obviously now it's had a fair bit of water on it. It soon dries back out though. There we go. Ah, Mummy can see me. That's odd. It's just not wanting to play ball. Okay, so just going to set this stamp block to one side, and then we can bring our palette back in. So we can still doodle into that with our glass pen if we want to. These are quite detailed images though, so I'm going to start off with, let's start off with a good old number 10 brush. And I'm just going to get just plain water, and let's go into this top one up here. Now the reason I start with plain water is, number one, it's going to give you an opportunity to see if that ink is going to bleed on you. So as I said, this is new to me ink pad, so it's always a good idea to test. And that's looking pretty stable, So that's a good start. And do this side too, because it's butterfly. I want to try and keep things even. And I'm going to start off with the red. So let's just drop that in there. Now, is this going to be a medium where we can get lots of really fine detail work? You could do if you want to get your fine brushes out. But for this first little bit, let's mix up that orange a bit better. There we go. And let's drop some of that orange out towards the tips of our wings. So we're going to start to get this kind of look that our wings are a little bit more translucent. And I'm just going to take that colour down there and just blend it in around that detail, like so. And we can do a bit around here too. And we'll do the same over here. So if you go slightly outside the lines, don't worry. We're not going to actually want a white border on these when we actually come to do our scanning, because we want to try and keep that outline to where our chocolate line is. So then let's take that up there. So I'm constantly referring back to the other wing to try and match. And there's this bit here, so let's just paint that in. So I'm not doing this with a tiny paintbrush. No, the size 10 is actually quite versatile in terms of its point. So just here, that's got a bit more red, so let's just pick up a little bit of that red and drop that in there. And if it needs to kind of smudge, you can smudge. Okay, so for any colours that you want to kind of keep separate, let the first colour dry. And now I'm going to move to my next butterfly. And let's go for the darker red this time. So don't forget, you've still got a little bit of that orange in your brush, so just be aware that you could get a little bit muddy. So if your purple is looking really purple, just clean it out first. And you don't necessarily have to colour them all the same. So this time I'm kind of keeping the centre here a bit clearer. And we'll do the same this side. And keep that centre a bit clearer. So this bit I got a little bit over. So a little bit more of that dark red. And the edge. Okay. Now I'm going to that blue, so that's quite a jump on my palette, but it might not be for you, so I'm just going to try and get as much of that red out my brush as possible. Okay, into the blue, and let's join that up. So, and we're going to start to see that kind of purpley tone coming in a little bit more than what we did in our mix. So I'm just going to give that another little stir. Just try and get some of that blue pigment up. Pop a little bit just closer to the body. And these edges. So I do apologise if you're watching on Facebook and screaming in the comments at me. But I can't see them, they're just not behaving today, so I do apologise, and I will be sure to go back and answer questions. And let's just take that round there. Try and let that blend a bit. And a little bit round here. There we go. Just going to dip back into that red and just try and get that purpley tone in there. There we go. So again, I'm going to move on to the next section, or the next butterfly I should say, because I want to try and avoid getting too much ink here, there and everywhere. So just running a little bit of room, so I'm just going to try and rotate this, I think, this way. Let me just there we go. Okay, so now we want to go for more of a yellowy tone for this next one. So when you need to keep your vivid yellows, you're better off starting with a fresh brush. So after each session, what I will normally do if I'm behaving is take all the brushes to the sink and actually wash through them with a little soap, and then if needed, if you need to shake your brush a bit, just use a tiny fraction of a little bit of conditioner just to shake your bristles, but not too much, else you're going to be affecting how well they soak up your paint, which we don't want. Okay, a bit yellow. Give it a stir because it's been kind of sitting there for a while now. And we're going to do yellow butterfly. Okay, around the section here and down the inside here. I'm going to go into my green next, so we've still got quite a bit yellow in the brush because we did that stirring. So it's not going to get too green too quick, and we can start to blend that up to these edges, down the body. So usually when I'm colouring butterflies, the last thing I'll colour is the actual centre, because then you can kind of judge what colour it needs to be to make those wings pop. Okay, next, while my brush is still green, I may as well go for the green next. So, a little dot just there. Let me come around the colour here, down the centre section, a little bit down there, and a little bit under here. Looking pretty good. So I'm just going to use what's up here at the top, just to bring a bit of that yellow, just to blend. Don't need very much. Okay, now let's just clean my brush a little, because I'm going to go to the blue, and we know that blue is really pale. The colours are eventually going to start picking up the others, even if you go really, really careful. So don't beat yourself up too much if that starts to happen. So I'm going to just blend that in there. A little bit more down the bottom here. Around the outside. And a little bit just in there to make our wing kind of pop. So I'm purposely keeping my painting nice and loose because when we go in with the next bit of detail, we want to keep that loose too, but we don't want to have it kind of looking muddy. So I might start a fresh little bit of my palette with more blue because I quite like that green, so I don't want to lose it altogether. So remember to shake with the lid on. Don't decorate the craft room. I'm going to put myself just a little map just there. Try and get this brush as clean as possible. It's getting a bit tricky now in the water, but I'll do my best. So, into our blue. So you can see that our blue is still really pale compared to our other colours. Let's just get in there and let it bleed. And around this top section. So again, if you think, oh, it's blobbing, don't panic. Just let it go where it wants to. And then that's centre again. I'm just going to take that out and around there. Let's take this out and around here. Okay. Back into the blue again. I'm doing the next one. So we've got one that's kind of purpley and a couple that are greeny. So let's do one that focuses more on just being blue. Okay. And finally, I'll go a bit blue on this one. And then let's pull our dark red. Can't really call it purple. Just through these sections here. And let it bleed. There we go. So I'm just going to dip back in that blue and just let that blend just a little bit more and there a bit of blue in it. There we go. Clean again. Back into the blue, just to add a bit more. So that red is going to be really overpowering for a pale blue, so just keep cleaning. Okay, so we now have our first layer of colour. So now we want to kind of go back in with a contrasting colour. So for our ready oranges up here, our blue is ideal. So let's just get that in there, a little bit more blue. One drop is plenty. Okay, I'm going to go back and do these details. Okay. Now, before I clean my brush, is there anywhere else that I think would benefit from a touch of blue? Let's go to this one. I might introduce some of that red, but not very much. Because we don't want mud. So, tiniest little touch, literally. Okay. Let's give that brush a clean. Gonna go to my orange. This one. Now, like I said, you could use a super duper fine brush for doing this and do it all perfectly and neatly. But it's not really the style that I'm going for. So hence we've done all our mark making in the background. So I didn't have a lot of paint on the brush, so I can go back into the yellow and it shouldn't hurt too much. Let's grab a bit of that orange and I'm just going to drop that around part of this centre there, and a little bit down the bottom here. It's a shame that they don't pop as much on camera as they do in person. They're really quite vivid. Okay, so a bit more yellow I think for this one here. So because our paint's gone over the top, I'm just going to blend that with that yellow a little bit. So that just means just giving your brush a little wiggle over the top, just to try and blend that line so it's not quite so. I'm going to take that round there. Now we've got a bit here that's still wet. Now you could go, oh, I'll really carefully avoid that then, or you can just go, okay, I'm just going to let that blend. It just makes it look a little bit more painterly. There we go. And same with this bit here where we've accidentally painted over a section. Rather than try and lift the colour off first, let the two kind of blend together. Now, onto this one. So I'm going to do this one next. Now, if we were to do yellow, bear in mind that we know that our ink is still wet, then you would definitely get mud in places. So I'm going to just skip a little bit closer in terms of the colour wheel and go to our orange rather than going to our yellow. Let's put that just down here. There we go. And finally, just to finish off, let's go back to our yellow. And just add our details to this one. So you're going to get some little bits of green that are going to pop up. That's fine. If you want to kind of give it a lip blast with a heat gun between each layer, that's fine too. Just try and keep it nice and loose because that's what suits these particular inks. I'm just going to put a little bit just on that top edge. And there we go. So if you have a more open stamp, then what you can do is doodle back into that with your glass pen. There we go. So now what you want to do is set this to one side, let it dry completely, and as it's drying, if you've got any crinkles, what they're going to do is they're going to flatten back out. Whereas if you try and blast it with a heat gun, you can find that in some ways you set that wrinkle in place. So just let them air dry, and same with your background. And then what I will do is next week I'll show you how to put the layout together. So if you have any other elements that you want to colour at the same time, now's the time to do that while you still have your ink in the palette. Otherwise, potentially you're wasting ink and you'll just throw it away, which isn't good. We want to make our supplies go as far as they can. So even if you think, oh, there's nothing else I want to do for this layout, even think, shall I colour some stamped images or shall I do some backgrounds? One or the other. Don't waste. Okay, so thank you for joining me, and just to remind you what we did. So we've got our rainbow background ready to go for next week. We've got our stamped butterflies, and then what I'm probably going to do is just do some other little bits of stamping just to use up my ink, because I want to kind of keep my background colour just that one edge. Take care for now, and I'll see you next week. Bye.